Who were these elite soldiers, the Triarii, and what set them apart within the formidable Roman army? Their name echoes through the centuries, synonymous with stoic defense and last-ditch resilience. To understand their significance, we must delve into the very foundations of Roman military organization, a world far removed from the legions we often envision. The Triarii represented the lingering embers of an older, more segmented military system, a structure gradually giving way to a more unified and standardized Roman fighting force. Before the rise of legendary figures like Scipio Africanus, and even before the Punic Wars reshaped the Mediterranean, the Roman army was a patchwork of citizen soldiers, divided by wealth and experience. This system, while effective in its time, faced inherent limitations. As Rome expanded its territorial control and encountered more sophisticated enemies, the need for greater cohesion and efficiency became increasingly apparent. The Triarii, as the rear guard and the most experienced of these citizen levies, embodied both the strengths and the weaknesses of this archaic structure. They represented a link to the past, a tradition of steadfast defense, but also hinted at the need for modernization. The very foundations upon which their role was built were beginning to shift. The pivotal figure in this transformation, the architect of a more robust and adaptable Roman military machine, was Marcus Furius Camillus. A renowned general and statesman, Camillus is credited with reorganizing the Roman army, establishing a new hierarchy based on age, wealth, and battlefield experience. This reorganization, occurring in the early 4th century BC, was not merely a cosmetic change. It redefined the roles and responsibilities of each class of soldier within the legionary structure. Camillus understood that a successful army needed more than just numbers. It required carefully orchestrated deployment of its manpower, maximizing the strengths of each individual and creating a synergistic fighting force. Within this new framework, the Triarii were elevated to a position of unparalleled importance. They were no longer just the oldest soldiers. They were specifically chosen from the wealthiest citizens, those capable of affording high-quality armor and weaponry. This economic status wasn't just about equipment. It reflected a certain level of social standing and, arguably, a degree of vested interest in the protection of the Republic. Men of property had more to lose, making them inherently more motivated to defend their land and their way of life. These men, the Triarii, were veterans of countless campaigns, possessing a deep understanding of tactics, battlefield awareness, and the crucial art of maintaining discipline under pressure. Their experience was invaluable, providing a bedrock of resilience and tactical acumen that permeated the entire legion. Their presence on the battlefield was not merely symbolic. It was a tangible assurance, a guarantee that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the Roman line would hold. They were the last line of defense, the rock against which the enemy's tide would break. Their contribution, though often invoked only in moments of dire need, was fundamental to the overall success of the Roman military enterprise, solidifying their legacy as one of the most respected and feared soldier classes in Roman history. They became a symbol of Roman grit, discipline, and the unwavering resolve to prevail, no matter the cost. The phrase ad triarios redis, it has come to the Triarii, became a proverb, signifying a desperate situation where all other options had failed, and only the most experienced and resolute could turn the tide of battle. Their legacy was thus enshrined not just in military annals, but in the very fabric of Roman language and culture. The story of Roman military prowess is often told through tales of legionary grit and tactical innovation. But behind the bravado of the front lines, a silent force stood ready, a force rarely deployed, yet profoundly important. These were the Triarii, the veterans of the legions, the stoic backbone of Roman armies. To understand their significance, we must first grasp the fundamental principles of Roman military organization. The maniple system, a revolutionary departure from earlier, less flexible formations, divided the legion into 3 lines: the hastati, the principes, and finally, the Triarii. The hastati, young and eager, formed the first line, their role one of aggressive engagement, softening the enemy and testing their resolve. Behind them stood the principes, seasoned veterans in their prime, ready to exploit any breakthroughs or bolster faltering attacks. But what happened when the hastati faltered? What happened when the principes were unable to turn the tide? This is where the Triarii entered the equation, their presence dictated by the gravity of the situation. Consider the chaos of ancient warfare. Clashing shields, the roar of battle cries, the relentless push and pull of men locked in deadly combat. The front lines were brutal, a whirlwind of steel and fury. Fatigue, casualties, and unforeseen circumstances could break the resolve of even the most experienced soldiers. If the hastati and principes were repulsed, the Roman army faced a critical juncture. Panic could set in, a rout could begin, and the entire legion could crumble. It was in this moment of extreme peril that the Triarii were called upon. Their deployment was not a simple reinforcement. It was a signal, a declaration that the battle had reached a critical stage. The phrase, residential ad triarios venit, meaning it has come down to the Triarii, became a proverb in Roman society, signifying a desperate situation, a last resort. The very act of calling up the Triarii was a strategic decision, a calculated risk. It admitted that the initial assaults had failed, but also demonstrated the unwavering commitment of the Roman command to victory. Unlike the hastati and principes who fought with the gladius, the short sword ideal for close-quarters combat, the Triarii were armed with the hastae, a long thrusting spear. This weapon, requiring open-order formations, was a remnant of an earlier era of Roman warfare. Its very presence spoke a tradition of unwavering discipline and of a commitment to steadfast defense. Imagine the psychological impact on both sides. The Roman soldiers, demoralized by the failure of their comrades, would see the Triarii forming their line, their large shields and long spears presenting an impenetrable wall. This sight served as a potent symbol of resilience, a reminder that the fight was far from over, that Rome would not yield. Conversely, the enemy, perhaps emboldened by their initial success, would face a completely different challenge. The hastati and principes had been mobile and aggressive, their short swords designed for rapid attacks. Now, they faced a disciplined line of veterans, bristling with spears, presenting a formidable obstacle. The momentum of their attack would be blunted, their formations disrupted. The Triarii were not simply a reserve force. They were a strategic anchor, a point of stability in the midst of chaos. Their presence allowed the Roman commanders time to reorganize, to redeploy remaining forces, and to launch a counterattack. The Triarii could hold a line, buy precious time, and provide the opportunity for a renewed assault. In essence, they were the safety net beneath the trapeze act of Roman warfare. The effectiveness of the Triarii stemmed not only from their equipment and training, but also from their experience. Composed of seasoned veterans, often older men who had served for many years in legions, they had witnessed the horrors of war firsthand. They understood the ebb and flow of battle, the importance of discipline, and the critical role of maintaining formation. Their experience instilled in them a steely resolve, a refusal to break, even in the face of overwhelming odds. While direct accounts of Triarii engagements are scarce, their reputation speaks volumes. Their mere presence on the battlefield could be enough to deter the enemy or to shore up the morale of wavering Roman troops. Their commitment to holding the line, their refusal to yield, made them a force to be reckoned with. The respect accorded to the Triarii extended beyond the battlefield. In Roman society, they represented the virtues of steadfastness, discipline, and experience. They were a symbol of Rome's commitment to defending its territory and its citizens. The very phrase residential ad triarios venit served as a reminder that even in the face of adversity, Rome possessed the strength and the will to persevere. Therefore, the Triarii were more than just soldiers. They were an embodiment of Roman values. They were the last line of defense, not just against the enemy, but against defeat itself. Their presence on the battlefield was a testament to the resilience of the Roman spirit, a declaration that Rome would not fall easily. It was this reputation, forged in the fires of countless battles, that made them a truly feared and respected force in the ancient world, a force whose impact reverberated far beyond the immediate context of the battlefield. How were they equipped to withstand the enemy onslaught? The late Roman Republic, a crucible of constant warfare, demanded soldiers who could not only fight, but endure. Among the ranks of the legion, the Triarii, veterans hardened by years of service, formed the final, unwavering line of defense. They represented a strategic reserve, a human bulwark against disaster. But what made these men so formidable? What distinguished them from their younger, less experienced comrades? The answer lies, in large part, in the superior armaments and equipment they possessed. While the hastati and principes, the younger legionaries, might skirmish and engage in initial assaults, the Triarii were intended to hold, to break the enemy's momentum at the point of critical failure. Their equipment reflected this purpose, an investment in quality and protection far exceeding that of their younger counterparts. It was a symbol of their veteran status, a testament to their experience, and a calculated bet on their survival. The Triarii bore expensive armor and equipment designed to resist the fiercest attacks. But was it enough to make them invincible? The answer, of course, is no. No soldier is truly invincible. But the investment in the Triarii's equipment dramatically increased their survivability and, crucially, their effectiveness in the desperate moments when a legion teetered on the brink of collapse. Their armor, while offering unparalleled protection for its time, came at a significant cost. This expense, coupled with a demanding training regime required to effectively wield their specialized weaponry, ensured that only seasoned veterans, men who had proven their worth on the battlefield, were entrusted with the role of Triarius. The vulnerability of any soldier, regardless of equipment, resided in the human element. Fatigue, fear, and the ever-present possibility of a lucky blow. The Triarii, despite their superior arms, were not immune to these factors. Their courage, however, bolstered by their confidence in their equipment and their unwavering loyalty to the Republic, often proved decisive. From the corazza musculata to the Italo-Corinthian helmet and their hastae spear, their equipment reflected their status and their preparation for war. Let us delve into the specifics of the Triarius equipment. Perhaps the most visually striking piece of their panoply was the corazza musculata, a sculpted breastplate mimicking the idealized physique of a Greek hero. While some Triarii likely wore the corazza musculata, its prohibitive cost meant that many relied on more practical alternatives. These alternatives included the lorica hamata, a mail shirt constructed from interlocking iron rings, providing excellent flexibility and protection against slashing blows, or the lorica squamata, a scale armor constructed from overlapping metal scales sewn onto a fabric backing. The choice likely depended on the individual Triarius wealth, preference, and availability. Regardless of the specific type, the armor provided crucial defense against the swords, spears, and axes of Rome's enemies. To protect their head, a vital target in any battle, the Triarii often wore a helmet of Italo-Corinthian design. This helmet, evolving from earlier Greek forms, offered comprehensive protection for the face and head, with cheek pieces that could be drawn down for added security. Though cumbersome, the Italo-Corinthian helmet instilled a sense of invulnerability and provided crucial protection from crushing blows. Later variations included cheek pieces that offered greater visibility without sacrificing defense. Unlike the hastati and principes, who favored the gladius hispaniensis for close-quarters combat, the Triarii retained the hastae, a long, heavy spear. This weapon, a relic of earlier Roman warfare, was perfectly suited for their role as a defensive line. The hastae allowed them to engage the enemy from a greater distance, disrupting their formations and preventing them from closing to inflict maximum damage. The weight and length of the hastae demanded considerable strength and skill to wield effectively, a testament to the Triarii's veteran status. They were masters of its use, able to brace themselves and deliver devastating blows that could shatter shields and unseat opponents. Completing their ensemble were a large, oval shield known as the scutum, which provided crucial protection against missile weapons and close-quarters attacks. This shield, often reinforced with metal bosses, served as a mobile barrier, allowing the Triarii to form a virtually impenetrable wall. They also carried a gladius for close-quarters fighting if their hastae was broken or lost, and a pugio, a short dagger, for a last-ditch defense. The equipment of the Triarii was more than just a collection of weapons and armor. It was a statement. It represented the best that the Roman Republic could offer, a tangible symbol of the value placed on experience and resilience. It was a testament to the importance of these veteran soldiers in the defense of Rome, a calculated investment in their ability to withstand the most brutal assaults and, ultimately, to secure victory, while not guaranteeing invincibility. The superior armaments of the Triarii undeniably made them a force to be reckoned with, a critical component of the Roman war machine, and a final, formidable barrier against utter defeat. They stood as a bulwark, not invincible, but profoundly and purposefully well-equipped. The story of the Roman military is one of constant adaptation and innovation. Nowhere is this clearer than in the dramatic shift in battlefield tactics that occurred between the early Republic and the period of Roman dominance. Understanding this evolution is key to grasping the true power of the Roman war machine and the changing role of its constituent units, particularly the veteran Triarii. But to appreciate the quinkings, we must first understand what it replaced: the phalanx. Before the Marian reforms and even before the Second Punic War, the Roman army, at its core, resembled that of its Greek neighbors, particularly the Etruscans. It relied on a heavily armed infantry formation known as the phalanx. Imagine ranks upon ranks of heavily armored men, their large, circular shields forming a near-impenetrable wall. Each soldier held a long spear, the hastae projecting outwards to ward off enemies. This formation was designed for a frontal assault, a crushing advance intended to break the enemy line through sheer weight and discipline. In theory, the phalanx was a formidable force. Its cohesion and mass firepower could overwhelm less organized opponents. However, the reality on the battlefield proved far more complex. The phalanx was fundamentally inflexible. Its effectiveness depended on maintaining a perfectly even front, requiring flat, open ground. Any terrain irregularity, a hillock, a ditch, even particularly dense thicket, could disrupt the lines, creating vulnerabilities that a savvy enemy could exploit. The disaster of the Battle of Allia in 390 BC serves as a stark reminder of the phalanx's limitations. Facing the invading Gauls, the Roman army, still largely organized along phalangite lines, was utterly routed. Accounts suggest that the Gauls exploited the uneven ground along the Allia River, breaking the Roman lines and causing widespread panic and carnage. This catastrophic defeat wasn't merely a loss. It was a wake-up call. The rigidity of the phalanx had been exposed, and the Republic's very survival hung in the balance. The defeat at Allia forced a painful but necessary period of self-reflection. Roman military thinkers began to analyze the shortcomings of their current system. They recognized that the close-order, inflexible nature of the phalanx was a significant liability in the very terrain of Italy and beyond. They needed a system that allowed for greater maneuverability and adaptability. This realization spurred a gradual but transformative shift in Roman military organization. The phalanx was dismantled, and in its place emerged a new tactical formation, one that would define Roman military success for centuries to come. The manipular legion deployed in a quinkings formation. The quinkings, named for its arrangement resembling the 5 dots on a dice or playing card, was a fundamentally different approach to warfare. It broke down the legion into smaller, more agile units called manipuli. These manipuli were grouped into 3 lines: the hastati, the principes, and the Triarii. Each line was composed of 10 manipuli, each with roughly 120 men, though the Triarii manipuli were smaller. Crucially, the manipuli were not arranged in continuous line, but rather in a staggered, checkerboard pattern. This created gaps between the manipuli, allowing for greater flexibility and maneuverability. The hastati, the youngest and most lightly armed soldiers, formed the first line. They were tasked with initiating the engagement and softening the enemy line. Behind them stood the principes, more experienced and heavily armed, ready to exploit any weaknesses that the hastati had created. It was the Triarii, however, the veterans of the legion and the oldest soldiers, who held the crucial reserve position. The Triarii were armed with long spears, a legacy of the phalanx, but their role had fundamentally changed. They were no longer the primary assault force, but rather a solid anchor and a final line of defense. Stationed at the rear, they were there to stabilize a faltering line, to counter a flanking maneuver, or to cover retreat. Their presence provided psychological reassurance to the younger soldiers, knowing that hardened veterans stood ready to support them. The expression residential ad triarios redite, it has come down to the Triarii, became a proverbial phrase meaning that the situation was dire and a last, desperate effort was required. The quinking's formation allowed for a far more dynamic and adaptable style of combat. The gaps between the manipuli allowed the Roman legionaries to maneuver around obstacles, to envelop the enemy flanks, and to exploit any vulnerabilities that arose during the battle. The stagger formation provided depth, allowing the Romans to absorb pressure and to maintain a continuous flow of fresh troops into the fight. If the hastati were pushed back, they could retreat through the gaps in the principes line, who would then engage the enemy. And if the principes faltered, the Triarii were there to step in and restore order. In essence, the quinkings transformed the Roman army from a static, inflexible force into a mobile, adaptable, and resilient fighting machine. The Triarii, while no longer the spirit of the attack, played a vital, strategic role in ensuring the legion's overall success. Their experience and discipline provided the backbone of the Roman army, allowing them to overcome diverse enemies and conquer vast territories. The tactical evolution from the phalanx to the quinkings was a key ingredient in Rome's rise to dominance, and the shifting role of the Triarii exemplifies this transformation. The very name, Triarii, evokes images of unwavering resolve, a final bastion of Roman strength. Their reputation, forged in the crucible of countless battles, paints them as nigh invincible warriors. But was this aura of invincibility a carefully cultivated myth, or did it reflect a tangible reality on the battlefield? This is the question we must confront to truly understand their role and eventual obsolescence. Undoubtedly, the Triarii possessed qualities that made them a force to be reckoned with. Their long years of service, often spanning a decade or more, provided them with invaluable combat experience. Their armor, heavier and more protective than that of the hastati and principes, offered a significant advantage in close-quarters combat, and their training, rigorously focused on maintaining formation and utilizing the long hasta, instilled a discipline that was the envy of many contemporary armies. Their presence on the field boosted morale, offering a tangible sense of security to younger, less experienced soldiers. The sheer sight of the Triarii holding the line could break the spirit of an enemy, knowing that they faced the most seasoned and determined of Rome's legionaries. Yet, to believe them invulnerable would be a grave error. While their equipment provided superior protection, it also came at a cost. The weight of their armor and weaponry made them less agile than the lighter troops. This lack of mobility could be a disadvantage in uneven terrain or against more nimble adversaries. Moreover, their effectiveness was predicated on maintaining formation and utilizing the hasta effectively. In a chaotic melee, where formations dissolved and individual combat took precedence, the Triarii lost some of their advantage. More crucially, their role as a last line of defense, the ultima spes, the final hope, carried inherent risks. The very fact that the Triarii were deployed meant that the initial lines of hastati and principes had failed to hold. This scenario often implied that the Romans were already facing significant losses, and that the enemy was pressing hard. Deploying the Triarii was a gamble, a desperate measure to prevent a complete rout. While their steadfastness could often turn the tide, it was not a guaranteed solution. A determined enemy, exploiting weaknesses in the Roman line, or overwhelming them through sheer numbers, could still break through even the Triarii's defenses. Instances of this happening, though rare in Roman historiography given the emphasis on success, undoubtedly occurred and should not be disregarded. Consider the Battle of Cannae, often cited as one of Rome's greatest military disasters. While the specifics of the Triarii's involvement are debated, the overall Roman defeat underscores the fact that even the most disciplined and well-equipped soldiers could be overwhelmed by superior tactics and overwhelming numbers. Even the invincible Triarii could not save the day when the very fabric of the Roman army was unraveling. The price of engaging the Triarii often involved absorbing significant losses beforehand, meaning their success came at a high cost of the overall Roman military strength. The evolution of Roman military doctrine ultimately rendered the Triarii obsolete. As Rome expanded its territories and faced increasingly diverse enemies, the rigid manipular structure, with its reliance on distinct troop types based on age and experience, became less effective. The introduction of the Marian reforms in the late 2nd century BC named after the general Gaius Marius, marked a significant turning point. These reforms abolished the property requirements for military service, creating a professional, standing army composed of citizen soldiers who were equipped and trained uniformly. This new army, organized into cohorts and legions, prioritized flexibility and adaptability. The need for distinct classes of infantry, like the hastati, principes, and Triarii, diminished. The legionaries were now trained to fight in a more fluid and adaptable manner, equipped with a pilum and gladius, and capable of performing a wider range of combat roles. The cohortal legion offered a more versatile and responsive fighting force, capable of adapting to different terrains and enemy tactics. The Triarii, with their emphasis on static defense and their reliance on the long hasta, simply did not fit into this new paradigm. Their slow, deliberate movements and their limited tactical flexibility were seen as liabilities in a more dynamic battlefield. While remnants of older organizational structures might have lingered for a time, the days of the Triarii as a distinct and essential component of the Roman army were numbered. Their gradual disappearance reflected a broader shift in Roman military thinking, a transition from a rigid, hierarchical system to a more professional and adaptable fighting force. The legacy of the Triarii, however, remained. Their example of courage, discipline, and unwavering commitment to duty continued to inspire Roman soldiers for generations to come, even as their specific role faded into the annals of history. They serve as a reminder that even the most formidable warriors are subject to the relentless forces of change and adaptation in the ever-evolving landscape of warfare. The annals of military history are replete with examples of battlefield success born from ingenuity, discipline, and the effective application of specialized units. Few exemplify this principle more powerfully than the Triarii of the Roman legions. These seasoned veterans, the backbone of the manipular system for centuries, offer profound insight into the Roman military ethos and the constant adaptation that underpinned Rome's rise to dominance. To understand their legacy, we must delve into their origins, their role on the battlefield, and ultimately, the reasons for their eventual disappearance, a transition that signals a pivotal shift in Roman military doctrine. The Triarii emerged from the early Roman army, a citizen militia organized along class lines. Originally, they were among the wealthiest citizens, equipped and responsible for their own arms and armor. This system reflected a societal hierarchy where military service was inextricably linked to civic duty and economic status. Over time, this structure evolved into a manipular system, a flexible and highly adaptable formation that divided the legion into three distinct lines: the hastati, principes, and the Triarii. The Triarii occupied the vital third line. They were the oldest, most experienced, and thus most reliable soldiers in the legion, dressed in full panoply, complete with heavy bronze armor, a large scutum shield, and the characteristic pilum javelin. Their most distinctive weapon was the hastae, a long spear used for thrusting. Their presence on the battlefield was a testament to Roman resolve, a last line of defense intended to hold firm when all else failed. The role of the Triarii was far more than simply acting as a reserve force. They were a tactical anchor, a stabilizing presence in the chaos of battle. Their deployment was often a signal of dire straits. The phrase rem ad triarios redis, meaning it has come to the Triarii, became a proverbial expression signifying a desperate situation. It underscored the gravity of the moment when these veterans were called into action. It implied that the younger, more agile hastati and principes had failed to break the enemy, and the fate of the legion now rested on the shoulders of these seasoned warriors. The tactical doctrine surrounding the Triarii emphasized discipline and a steadfast defense. Unlike the hastati and principes, who engaged in more aggressive maneuvers, the Triarii were expected to hold their ground, forming a solid shield wall and repelling enemy assaults with their spears. Their presence provided a rallying point for the wavering ranks of the younger soldiers, allowing them to regroup and potentially renew the attack. They were, in essence, the embodiment of Roman resilience, a tangible manifestation of the determination to prevail against all odds. However, the very qualities that made the Triarii so effective also contributed to their eventual obsolescence. As Rome's military commitment expanded and the nature of warfare evolved, the limitations of the manipular system, and particularly the Triarii, became increasingly apparent. The expansion of Roman citizenship and the increasing reliance on allied troops blurred the lines between the different classes within the legion. The social distinctions that had originally defined the hastati, principes, and Triarii began to erode. Furthermore, the changing battlefield demanded greater flexibility and adaptability. The static defensive role of the Triarii was less effective against new enemy tactics and the challenges of fighting in diverse terrains. The Marian reforms, introduced by the general Gaius Marius in the late 2nd century BC, marked a turning point. Marius abolished the property requirements for military service, opening the legions to a wider segment of the population. He also standardized equipment and training, creating a professional, standing army. This standardization meant the end of the distinct manipular formations. The legion was reorganized into cohorts, larger and more flexible units that were better suited to the demands of long-term campaigns and increasingly complex military operations. The specialized roles of the hastati, principes, and triarii were effectively eliminated, replaced by a unified fighting force trained to execute a wider range of tactical maneuvers. The disappearance of the Triarii was not simply a matter of discarding an outdated tactical unit. It signified a fundamental shift in Roman military thinking. The emphasis moved away from a rigid, class-based structure towards a more streamlined and professionalized army. This transition was driven by necessity, as Rome faced new threats from increasingly sophisticated enemies and the logistical challenges of maintaining a vast empire. The Marian reforms were revolutionary, but they also had profound social and political consequences. The professionalization of the army led to a greater reliance on generals, who could command the loyalty of their troops and wield considerable political power. This ultimately contributed to the instability of the late Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. Despite their eventual disappearance, the legacy of the Triarii endures. They stand as a symbol of Roman discipline, resilience, and the importance of experience in warfare. Their presence on the battlefield, even as a last resort, instilled confidence in their comrades and fear in their enemies. They represented the core values of the Roman Republic: duty, courage, and unwavering commitment to the state. More broadly, the story of the Triarii provides a valuable lesson about the importance of innovation and adaptation in military history. The Romans were not inherently superior warriors. Their success was largely due to their willingness to learn from their enemies, adapt their tactics, and constantly evolve their military organization. The transition from the manipular system to the cohort-based legion, though marking the end of the Triarii, was a necessary step in maintaining Rome's military dominance. The Triarii may have faded from the battlefield, but their contribution to the Roman war machine remains undeniable. They were more than just soldiers. They were a living embodiment of Roman virtues, and their story serves as a reminder that even the most formidable military forces must adapt to survive in the ever-changing landscape of warfare. Their legacy is a testament to the enduring power of discipline, experience, and the constant pursuit of innovation. The ghost of the Triarii, spear in hand, continues to whisper a timeless lesson across the centuries, reminding us that military success is not solely about brute force, but also about the intelligent application of strategy and the unwavering commitment to adaptation.